moment. But thanks to everybody who is able to join us tonight. We are going to record this, so if there's anything you missed, you'll be able to look back at it. We sent links, I sent links in a couple of different emails to some of the previous recordings that we had on Lobbying 101 and also storytelling and those trainings we had. So those are things to reference. But today, Mara, who is our health policy associate, is going to walk us through a quick presentation on what to remember as we prepare for our different meetings with lawmakers on the 28th, 29th, and 30th of this month. And thank you to everybody who has already filled out the survey to let us know about your attendance when you're available on those days. I think everybody here has actually filled it out. So we'll chat that out again periodically throughout the evening tonight, just to make sure everybody has the link. If you haven't, you can fill that out and just let us know when you're available. With that, I think we want to turn it over to Mara to do the presentation. And if time allows, we are going to wrap up at 6 tonight. So just an hour rather than our regular hour and a half. But if we have some time, we can do a little practicing as well today.
Awesome. Well, hi, everybody. Let me just get my screen sharing up. And like Becca mentioned, that we have gone over this in the past. So this is kind of a shorter version, but really, and just some quick reminders about it as well. So a lot of you, since you have already taken the survey, you are well aware of the fact that we are doing meetings virtually with legislators at the end of this month. So first things I kind of wanted to cover, just some quick reminders about legislative meetings via Zoom. So first, you'll want to ensure that you set up for your meeting in a quiet place. This will make it easier for you to fully participate in the meeting and not have to worry about distractions. Another thing you'll want to remember is you want to dress for the online meeting as if you were attending in person. So this doesn't mean that you need to wear something like a full suit, but it is important to wear something a little bit more on the side of business and office appropriate, just because we can kind of only see you from here up, but in case you have to get up, and if you don't want everyone seeing your pajama shorts or something like that. Another important thing to be aware of prior to your meeting is that you'll need to be a bit flexible. Legislators are quite busy the 3 days a week that they are at the Capitol, and their schedules can rather quickly. I know a lot of you have met with legislators in the past, so you're probably a little bit familiar with this. But just being flexible, that might mean that you have a shorter meeting. Instead of 30 minutes, maybe it's only 20. Or you might end up meeting with staff. I've heard that from a couple offices that we'll be meeting with at the end of the month already, that will probably be meeting with one of their staffers. And so don't take this personally, as it is a common occurrence. Meeting with staff is a great opportunity for discussion and education. And many of staff members have worked in Lansing for years and are very knowledgeable about a variety of topics. And it's important to keep in mind, they're also the ones providing information and guidance to the lawmakers. So they're also important people to talk to and educate on our issues. And sometimes they have a little bit more wiggle room with their schedule. So you might be able to get a full 30-minute meeting with them, whereas maybe with the legislator, you would have only gotten 15 minutes. So that's always something to keep in mind as well. And we always like to think about meeting with lawmakers as kind of an ongoing conversation. So this might be one meeting that you're having in September, but we hope to continue to be in touch with them, especially since we're hoping that bills are introduced and we can get some things moving forward. And so we'll continue meeting with them over the course of the legislative session. Okay, so then when we actually get to the actual meetings, I want to go over a couple important things to remember for your actual meetings. So one of the things to keep in mind is that you'll be working in teams for these meetings. Teams will consist of some of the folks who are participants in this training program. Others will be some of our fellows who participated in a couple of the events that have taken place over the past couple of months. And then some of the organizers of these trainings. So teams will consist of a team leader. And they'll just be the one who will be in charge of making sure that your meetings kind of run smoothly. And, you know, maybe if there's like an awkward pause or if there's a question that folks aren't really sure of, they'll be the one kind of taking a note and remembering that this is something that we need to follow up with the office on. So for starters, once you're actually in your meeting, you'll want to introduce yourself, and you'll also want to include if you're there representing an organization or a specific community. For example, for most meetings, they'll start off with everyone introducing themselves and mention that you're there specifically to discuss ending lead exposure and lead poisoning. Since we're doing a full week of this, that'll probably be something that we mentioned as well as, you know, we're a group of impacted community members and health professionals and people who care about ending lead poisoning here in the state of Michigan. And we're meeting with legislators this entire week to discuss actions that we can take. So once you kind of do introductions, you'll also want to have a brief presentation. This is where personalizing and localizing your issue comes in. And it's important that the legislators and their staff know the stories you all have to share regarding your work and experiences related to lead poisoning. It really helps to make the connection for them on the importance of the issue. So you'll want to share, you know, why does this issue matter to you? How does it impact you, your family, your students, your clients, your patients? That's what they really need to be hearing. And that's what's really going to stick with them and stay with them. And, you know, personalizing the issue for them as well. This is impacting people who live in your district. This is happening in your own community. Really helping them understand the fact that this is an important issue. It's something that's happening throughout the state of Michigan, and that, you know, now's the time to really take some actions and really talk about what it is that they can be doing. So once you kind of do your presentation and you share your thoughts, you'll also want to make sure you get the lawmaker speaking. What do they already know about lead poisoning and its health impacts? Are they aware of the problems regarding lead in our state? They also might have specific questions for all of you. If you know the answer to their questions, great. If not, let them know, you'll get back to them with the answer. Don't feel the need to try and guess. We just want to make sure we're sharing the most accurate information possible. And so that's also a great way to keep the conversation going with offices, is that, you know, we share information with them afterwards. And another important thing you want to remember that you're sharing within the meeting is a specific request or ask. This is really important, and many times lawmakers and their staff will, you know, flat out ask, you know, how they can help or what we are asking them to do. So you'll want to be sure that that is an important piece of the meeting. We will also be sharing educational materials, including the lead maps that a lot of you have seen already in past trainings, and the newly created parents platform with offices before and after the meeting. So those are things that you can always reference when you're talking to them. And then if you have contact information you'd like to share with them as well, you can always put it in the chat, just kind of like how we do it here. All of the meetings will be held via Zoom. And that's always a great way, because then if they have follow-up questions, they can contact you directly. Or if there's just things in the future, you know, a lot of times we want them to know that they can use us as a resource and that we're here to help them if they have questions or if they're looking for information. And then lastly, you'll also want to keep in mind that you want to thank them for their time before the end of the meeting. Like I said before, lawmakers and their staff are pretty busy, so you want to show appreciation for taking the time to meet with you. And with that, I am going to stop sharing and see if there are any specific questions about the legislative meetings before we move on to talking points.
I don't know if this is going to get covered later or not, but do we know who some of the targeted legislators are, or is that going to be covered later?
We can actually talk about that now. So we, and when I say we, I mean myself and one of our program assistants, are currently in the process of finalizing the schedule. We have been targeting the lawmakers that represent all of you in Lansing. So we're trying to get meetings with some of your actual districts representation. And then we've also been targeting folks who sit on health and human services and health policy, because Most likely when bills are introduced, those would be the committees that would be hearing those bills. And then also some of the legislative champions that have been really good on lead in the past. And then I don't know if this is the best time to mention it, but also we have gotten word that there will be a package of lead bills being introduced in October. And we do have some meetings scheduled with some of the offices that are sponsoring bills. So those will be great conversations to have, since we will have some bills to be discussing with folks pretty soon.
And some of those bills actually line up really well with the priorities that you all set over the last couple of months. And so when we go through those priorities later, we'll let you know which ones we expect bills in October on. So they're not introduced yet, but they're coming soon.
And the plan is to actually share the somewhat finalized schedule early next week. Like I mentioned, because offices can get a little busy, we're currently in the process of really trying to lock down the full schedule, but there is still a little bit of wiggle room there with just trying to get confirmation about what time the meetings will be. So once we have that all figured out, I also know that a couple folks are still filling out the survey. So once we have everyone's availability, we can finalize the schedule and share, this is your team, this is your team leader, these are the offices you'll be meeting with. We'll also be sharing bios for all of the legislators. So you can take a look prior to see, this is who you're meeting with, this is their district, here are the committees that they sit on, and that way you can kind of have a good sense of, what they've been working on in the past and how you can maybe make a connection between lead poisoning and the work that they've already done in Lansing, or things that they're involved in just in their personal life. Do folks have any other specific questions regarding meetings or kind of how that format works? Well, there's time, I guess, if things come up, or if you want to just send it in the chat, we can always make sure it's addressed before the end of today's meeting. And then Becca, do we want to go over talking points now? I have them pulled up so I can share that.
Yeah, I think that would be good. And I just chatted out the link to the survey. If you haven't filled it out, please do so. And that'll help us in terms of knowing when you're available on those days, so we can schedule meetings and make sure they work for you.
All right, so let me share my screen again. And of course, now I have too many tabs open, which is usually what happens. Oh, actually, hold on one second. Sorry, y'all. I was going to say, I don't know if anyone else has it up at the moment. I thought I had it open. Oh, perfect.
I will share. Yeah, and then, but I'll let you talk.
Great, that works.
Okay.
Okay. Great, so folks should be able to see that. I believe it's also been sent around via email, so folks might have had an opportunity to kind of look over this already. So these are the talking points that all of you can kind of pull some information from to share in your meetings. So the main things that we really want to cover is that, what is the problem with lead? We want to make sure that we're sharing that, lead threatens children's health and that it can be found in paint, dust, soil, and drinking water here in the state of Michigan, and that it can be found in communities across the state within their water, homes, and schools, and that it's important that they recognize the fact that lead harms children's brains and bodies, and that there's no safe level of lead exposure, and that lead poisoning is entirely preventable. So those are some big key messaging pieces that you'll want to share with offices, letting them know, here's the problem, and that, this is something that we can be preventing. And then you can talk a little bit about lead in our communities. So unfortunately, a lot of communities here in the state of Michigan have alarmingly high percentages of lead poisoned children under the age of 6. And Michigan children were lead poisoned in a couple of different ways. The exposure depends on case-by-case basis. But the problem also is that we're not seeing the entire scope. Not all children are being tested. And so the number is probably higher than the actual percentages that we actually have now. And a lot of that has to do with the fact because lead is an urban and a rural problem, with over 70% of Michigan housing stock being built before 1978, prior to lead paint being banned. And due to aging infrastructure, and then a history of heavy industry. So those are all like some of the causes that you can also talk about. As you can see here, if you would like to share, or if offices have specific questions about percentages of children who are coming back with elevated blood lead levels, we do have statewide numbers, and then we also have for different areas around the state as well, if they're interested in that particular information. And then I mentioned before in the slides about how you'll want to talk about health impacts. Here are a couple that you can pull from. Lead exposure is linked to hearing loss, osteoporosis, anemia, tooth decay, ADHD, kidney damage, reproductive issues. You can pull from all of those to kind of show the many ways in which that lead does impact people's health outcomes. And also you can talk about societal and economic impacts as well. We have some listed here that you can always pull from, specifically around costs associated to lead exposure, everything from increased healthcare to special education, and lost lifetime earning potential are all things that you can mention in meetings to kind of drive home the point about how lead poisoning impacts people here in the state of Michigan and how we need to be taking actions to address it because it is a preventable problem. And then lastly, the big thing, like I mentioned before, you want to really highlight your asks and making sure that you have an ask that you share with offices. Everyone who participated in LIFT has helped create the policy platform and the action agenda. So here are the things that we're calling on lawmakers to do and the asks that we have for them. So requiring that homes are tested for lead prior to sale or transfer of lease, and lead hazards are abated if found. Requiring universal blood testing for all Michigan children aged 1 and 2, ensuring sustainable funding for lead poisoning prevention and lead abatement programs, and having the state of Michigan assume responsibility for the Federal Renovation, Repair, and Painting Enforcement Program, or RRP, which requires contractors to have lead safe certification and do work on pre-1978 homes. So these are things that you can share with them and say, these are our asks. These are things that we really want to see moving forward here in Michigan, because at the end of the day, they will help decrease lead exposure and making sure that we're preventing lead poisoning here in the state. Do any of the other organizers have anything they'd like to add about talking points, or does anyone have any questions about talking points?
One thing I would add is, there's a lot here, and don't feel like you have to say all of these because your stories are incredibly important. And so you might just look at these and highlight for yourself what are a few things that resonate with you that you want to really get through. Obviously, this ask, we're going to have this on a specific sheet that's nicely designed that talks about who the LIFT, everyone in LIFT is, and what these policy points are as well. So that's something that we'll have in a separate sheet. So that's important. And then I'm going to share something else really quickly. So Mara mentioned the maps. Let's see. So this is just one of them, and we have them also for specific geographic areas like Kent County, Flint, Dearborn, Detroit. So this is the statewide map, and this is another one, like you might direct them to information like this when you're saying lead is an urban and a rural problem. So you can see all of those dots represent a number of children. You can see the legend down here with how many children, depending on how large the dot is. And obviously we have a lot of kids in a lot of our urban core areas, but we also have kids way up in the UP, up here in the Keweenaw that are lead poisoned. So it's important for us to think about the housing stock. And that's why you know, when you meet with folks who are from different areas and you'll look at their bios beforehand and you'll say, oh, this person is from this particular county, you look at the map, and then you can sort of pinpoint to make it, you know, hit home for them. Obviously, with your own lawmakers from your own districts, you're going to spend more time focusing on who those are. So the bios that Mara talked about will really help you look at this map, think about how you want to present that in the group. And we're doing our best to, I think, have folks stick with the same team as possible. Obviously, everybody's schedule is different, so there's going to be times where you're not going to be with the same team members. But like we said, we'll get that schedule out to you early next week, at least the preliminary, subject to change if lawmakers change their schedules. So, what questions do folks have, or things that you're nervous about that you want to share, or excited about that's worked well in other meetings that you want to share with the group?
I was going to ask, and apologies if I missed this, but I've only had legislative meetings once before, and it was pre-COVID. So we brought folders with materials with both our one-pager and any maps and things like, you know, you just talked about. I don't know kind of what your game plan idea was for sharing those things virtually, if it was like a screen share or like a chat, or share a file over the chat, or just kind of wondering what your experience is if you have doing that virtually.
Yeah, that's a good question. So we will be sharing the materials with offices prior to. So the map, including the one that Becca just shown, we'll be sharing that along with a one-page document that highlights the asks, which were created through the parents platform. So we'll be sharing those prior to. You can also reference them throughout your meeting. The way that they're set up is that everyone will have access, so they can like share their screen. So if someone had something that they really wanted to highlight, you could pull that up and share it that way. I will mention though that sometimes legislative offices do join by phone. So don't fully rely on that. And that's one of the reasons why we also share materials prior to, because then if someone is only available by phone, they still have access to it. And you can say, oh, you know, I'm referencing this map. It's the one that is of the entire state. And that way they still have that information. They can look at it. And then when we do our follow-up with offices, because I'm sure there will be some questions, we also like to send out a thank you afterwards. We'll share those materials again, just so that we don't have to worry about them getting lost in the shuffle. But great question, Jay.
You know, another thing
Awesome,
we could do is we can put the all of the materials that we're sending to the offices up on our Lyft website. And we have a page for these days. And so we can populate that. And right now it doesn't have anything on there, but we'll do that. And then we'll share that link with you again, so you have it for the September days. And then you'll have everything if you want to like pull up a map or something like that, and share it live. Other questions or concerns or thoughts? Okay. How do folks feel about breaking up into a couple of small groups and doing a practice meeting? I see some nods. Okay. Mara or Tanya, can you group folks up? And then maybe, I'm counting, maybe 3 groups of 3. And then we can have maybe the 3 of us be the lawmaker.
Mara, it's not giving me the option to do breakout rooms. Are you?
I was just about to say that I don't have that ability at the moment either.
Becca,
I do.
Did you enable
Sorry.
it? Oh, okay.
Let's see. I'm slow, sorry. Actually, I think it's my computer that's slow. It's not letting me go into a room. So Izelda, are you willing to be a lawmaker for the purpose of this exercise? Okay, thank you. I don't know how to put myself in a room. Okay. Do folks see that? Did I do it right? Hi, Chantal. Yeah, I can fill you in. Florence, can you see your room? Oh, she's gone now. Okay, good. Can you hear me, Chantal?
Yes.
Okay, great. So Mara just went over, actually, I'm gonna pause. Welcome back, everybody. And the last group's coming back. So how did it go? Do folks want to report out a little bit what, you know, what went well? Anything feel weird in your breakout groups when you did that?
I think Amanda, I'll go first. I think Amanda, I had Amanda and Allie and I let them both kind of speak their piece, but I think in part, I kind of reiterated what you said and I agreed with you, and that's why I didn't say anything the first time. I think adding a little bit of your personal story to it of what occurred, what you can relate to, and then the issue that you would like to see lawmakers address. And again, you know, going over those topics and going over those issues of, you know, if it's universal testing, or if it's a code ordinance, or if it's you know, marketing per se, like saying, bringing that awareness to families. So just things like that. So I think they both did a really awesome job.
Awesome. Anything that you both want to add? And then maybe let's move to Mara's group. And Mara, if you can start a report out, and then we'll go to your group members and then go from there. Anything else from what I'm now calling group number 1? Izelda's group.
I think that like once we just have a little bit more time looking over those talking points and kind of crafting everything, and also like knowing who we're talking to, so that we know, hey, I know that you voted this way on this bill, like thank you for that, or, you know, things like that, I think will be really helpful too.
Yeah. And you'll also know like who else is in your group, and maybe if you want to send an email to the group members like, hey, this is what I'm thinking of the plan, like who wants to do this in this meeting. So, you know, you'll have that in advance. Remember, things can change in Lansing on a dime. So it might get messed up, and that's out of our hands, but we'll do the best we can to make sure you have that info. Mara, how did things go in your group?
Yeah, I would say overall really well. Jay and Florence were in my group. I think, Jay, I'm going to steal the one thing that you shared, is that, you know, just keep in mind that you don't have to be the expert on everything, and that the important thing is really sharing your thoughts and feelings, and a little bit of your perspective and your story, and to also just remember, the lawmakers are just people. And so they're probably not an expert either. So don't really, think that they already know everything, or that, oh, you're going to go in there and they're going to have all the knowledge that about lead already. So keep that in mind and make sure that you're really sharing your thoughts, because that's what they really need to be hearing.
Awesome. Jay and Florence, anything that you want to add to that?
Well, this is my first experience in this process. I have not done this before, so it was really helpful to hear Jay's perspective, and also from Mara what the focus is and the time and kind of how it might be organized. So I think that will be helpful. I am by no means an expert. However, I've spent 16 years as a school nurse, so it's not foreign to me. And I guess the only thing I'm a little confused about, if I can just talk about that, is so, there is like a coalition, right, through the Michigan Department of Public Health. Isn't there like there's initiatives going on? Because I know, like, I'm a Ferris State University professor, and District 10 is the public health, is the, Department of Public Health in that area, District 10, and we partnered with them, and we had our student nurses go out and do lead testing. Mm-hmm. And because they had gotten this huge grant. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that they had a problem with is that they didn't have the power to do the lead testing, because in order for you to do that, you have to have manpower, and they didn't have that, although they got that large grant. And then of course you need all the supplies and the equipment and so our medical lab students did the actual processing, and then our nursing students did the testing of the children. And I was not a lead on that, so and this is just from meetings that I've got reports on that. And I guess what I'm thinking is, when we're talking about what's important and the message, when I was looking over the coalition and what their focus is, it's pretty broad. I mean, they want like everything. And I'm just curious, like, what is it that we should focus on? Because obviously there's all kinds of ways. What is it that, over your experience, do you think is most important?
Right.
As far as, like, I don't know if I'm making sense.
Yeah, that does make sense. And I don't know, there's several coalitions, but there's also the Lead Commission, which is that I serve on, and some of our other partners, Dr. like Thompson, others serve on. And you're right, there's a long, big 109 point roadmap that we created a few years ago, but we have done some prioritization of that. And then our families and our lead impacted families training, they created this list that I just chatted out to everybody, if folks want to look at the chat. So I guess it's not very nicely designed there. I'll share my screen again, so you can see. So these are the specific things that we have prioritized with the families in the lead impacted families training. So requiring that homes are tested before sale or transfer of lease. And that is something that is likely to be introduced in the bill package that Mara talked about before in October. Requiring universal blood testing for all children aged 1 and 2. This is something that the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services is working on. I'm going to be serving on a committee to see how we can do this to make this most feasible. That's just being set up right now. There isn't a bill sponsor for this right now, but it's important for us to start talking to the legislature about this, because we will need money, like you're saying, Florence, for the testing devices and for this to happen if we want to make sure kids are tested. Speaking of money, the next one is ensuring that we actually have a sustainable funding source for lead poisoning prevention and lead abatement programs. There are some real big opportunities right now with federal money that's come down the pike already from the COVID American Recoveries Act, the stimulus funding earlier this year. And then there's likely some other opportunities if the infrastructure package goes through with the feds that will come to the state and to local communities to have funding, but that's kind of a one-off thing. So it's really important that we take advantage of that, but it doesn't solve things 5 years down the road. When that funding from the federal government dries up, we need to make sure that we still have the resources to provide those services to children, case management, to abate homes that need lead abatement, and all of the other things there. And then the last point here that we prioritized is, again, having the state of Michigan assume responsibility for a program that's currently enforced by the EPA, the Federal Renovation, Repair, and Painting program. And it's usually better when states enforce this program versus the feds, because it doesn't get as much attention by the federal government doing it in their different regions as it would if the state assumed responsibility for that. Now, in doing that, there is money that the federal government would then give to Michigan to assume responsibility for this. So resources would come as a result of this to the state so they actually can enforce and make sure that contractors are certified to do work on pre-1978 homes. So those are the things that that this group has prioritized over our last couple of meetings. Does that kind of get to what we want to focus on? Your question there? Good, excellent. We have about 10 minutes. I want to make sure, Tanya, we get an update from you and how things went in your group.
Yes, so I had Minnie and Sarah Hendricks in my group, and we kind of did more of like a question and answer. This is what works well. This is what doesn't kind of session. And Minnie made a really good point that because she's done these types of meetings before, that they are busy just like we are, and they don't want to be on Zoom, you know, for hours with you. They're not going to interrogate you. And one point that we did make as well, if they ask you a question you don't know the answer to it, it is totally fine to just say I don't know the answer to that, and either I'll get back with you or, you know, I'll let somebody know, and we can like Mara said, we're going to send materials afterwards, and we can let them answer those questions to the best of our ability. So if you do not know the answer to a question, just please say that, and they will totally understand. And another thing that we talked a lot about, which I think everybody's mentioned, is how important the personal side of this is. That they don't want to watch you recite every bullet point on that talking point list, and you probably don't want to do that either. So it's in everybody's best interest to, you know, tell your how this affects you. And I know Sarah talked about how she was a nurse, and so she talked about, you know, the medical side of it. And like everybody has said before, that piece of it is really important.
Fantastic. Sarah or Minnie, anything else you'd like to add?
No, I think we covered everything very good. You know, good. I think everybody is prepared.
Yeah, I think I'll definitely pour over the materials like we've said, and kind of get my statement ready.
Awesome. Well, good. Well, we can wrap up a little bit early, but I want to just put another call out there in case anyone has any other questions for the big group or thoughts. And remember, put out that link again. If you haven't already, please do let us know when you're available via the survey for those dates. Oops, I copied the wrong thing. That'll go out in a moment. Here's that survey link again. Cool. All right. Well, if there isn't anything else, we will wrap up just a few minutes early. Have a lovely evening, and I can't wait to see you all, well, many of you, in meetings in a couple of weeks.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. And if there's anything that comes up in the meantime, feel free to email me or Mara or Tanya, and we will make sure we answer any questions you have. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Thank you.